Well, hello. Welcome to this week's edition of Sarah Says. This is the next to the last in the series of Retake Your Personal Power. And this week is week 11. We're talking about patterns and habits. I continue to be extremely grateful to all of you for your support, encouragement, responses, ideas, all of that. It is helpful and meaningful and encouraging all at the same time. So want to just begin by reminding each of you that this is a 12-part series, and this is week number 11, and it isn't required that you watch the whole thing, but there are definitely 12 areas that will empower you greatly to retake your personal power. And in the world that we're in right now, the more power that we can have over ourselves, the more stable, secure, comfortable, confident, calm, and resilient we can be. So I just encourage you to go back and check out the other parts of the series. They are based on a lifetime of coaching, consulting, my master life coach training, my spiritual training, and I think that you'll find value in those. And share these with your friends. This series is free. These workshops are free. And so Siri thinks I'm talking to her. Sorry. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I want to make sure I am connected with everybody, so give me just a second. Okay, well, let me, all right, we're going to share the screen here. So this is the this week's PowerPoint information. So want to start with just reminding everybody that I am not a medical doctor or a licensed counselor, therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, any of those things that require a medical or a psychological degree. I am, as I said before, a master life coach. I am a consultant for global companies on agility, behavior, emotional intelligence, a lot of things like that. My master life coach training has afforded me some niche certifications in emotional intelligence, success, happiness, patterns of behavior, things like that. But if you are under the care of any licensed professional who is either prescribed a course of action or any medicines, please do not change or discontinue or start anything without checking with them, because they are the professional who is responsible for your care, and you need to discuss any changes that you might want to make with them. Okay. Anything I say here is simply my opinion. It's for educational purposes and for us to learn and grow together. Hello, Donna. Appreciate you joining us, me and you here today. All right, so today I want to talk about patterns matter, and the gist of patterns and habits. I use those two interchangeably, but I think our habits do go forth in patterns and they solidify. Is that we have got to recognize that that is hypnosis in action. We're behaving in ways sometimes without even recognizing what it is that we're doing. And it is a big part of bias, whether conscious or unconscious. It's a part of racism, whether that word triggers you or not. It is based on patterns of thought and habit. It is short of being chemically depressed or chemically addicted. We can find that addictions and chronic depression, some of these things come from habits. But again, some of it is chemical, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it other than, find the medical care and the mental health professionals who will get you through this. So please remember the things I'm talking about today. I recognize there are exceptions. I don't teach to exceptions. I teach to general behaviors, general patterns, general habits. And so, first of all, I want to remind you that the series is based on retaking your personal power, and a big part of that is mastering your own damn self. We spend a lot of time, effort, and energy Look at that. We spent a lot of time, effort, and energy working on, focusing on changing other people. Well, look at them. Look at what they're doing. Look at what they're saying. Look at how they're living. And, it is just such a crock for us to be engaged in that kind of behavior. It is neither good for us, good for them, healthy for us, healthy for them, healthy for society. Just jump on Facebook any day of the week and you'll find a whole bunch of Monday morning quarterbacks talking about what should have been done yesterday, and their own lives are just a hot mess. So the whole focus here, to create the world that we are after, we have to focus on ourselves. What are you going to do about yourself? What are you going to do about the things you can control? And so that's retaking your power. It's controlling yourself, controlling your patterns and your habits. So let's talk about those. This is by no means comprehensive in terms of everything, but I've tried to put all of this into some buckets. So I want to talk about the 4 major patterns of behavior that I focus on when I'm coaching, consulting, helping people. There's the innate patterns, which are your lizard brain responses to everything. Okay. Go back and watch the piece on emotional intelligence. We have an amygdala gland in our brain that does not know the difference between a threat to our ego or a threat to our physical safety. And so we have these responses. They're just lizard brain. We get mad, sad, angry, happy, whatever it is. These are innate responses hardwired into us, and it is difficult, if not impossible, to control these. And we have to be aware of those so that we can see how they play into our patterns of behavior, our habits, for good or bad. We also have societal patterns, societal habits. Whether your family taught you that your peanut butter goes in the pantry or goes in the fridge, that's a habit. Do you brush your teeth once a day, twice a day? Do you take a shower every day? Is it nasty for someone who doesn't take a shower every day? You have these patterns and habits that were taught to you by your family, by school. Get up and say the pledge, or you have to ask for permission before you go to the bathroom, or, some patterns and habits get built into us in church. The habits and patterns of thought and behavior that, this is right and this is wrong. These are hardwired, hard society programming that happen. And so if you couple that with some of our innate responses, this stuff is really just wired into the core of who we are. And it's really hard to separate some of these societal patterns that really aren't very good or healthy or productive or conducive to collaboration, communication, the things that make a civil society. The third pattern of behavior is coping, and these come from us, but they also are reflective of how we grew up, how we were taught to handle things. So how do you manage stress? Stress eaters, stress drinkers, people who indulge in one thing or another as a means of coping with stress. These are patterns that we learn over time, and whether they're good or bad for us, they are the things that we have come to be able to control. So that pattern comforts us because there's stress I can't control, so I'm going to eat, drink, be merry, whatever that is, as my response to this. And then finally, the one I really want us to be thinking about are the mindful patterns. I know that my lizard brain response is, when you criticize me, I'm going to knee jerk and be defensive, but I'm going to be mindful. And so I'm going to say to myself, something different than I would if I wasn't aware of these other patterns that come up. And so we, to retake control of ourselves, to retake our personal power, we have to spend a little mindful observation on ourselves and recognize what are our innate responses that are hardwired for us. Some people get angry when they're hurt. Some people cry. Some people retreat. That fight, flight, freeze, or faint, we all respond. And so bring that into the 21st century. How are we acting? So these are the 4 main areas. And then I want to talk about the types of behavior that are typically subject to patterns. So the first thing, hey, Tony. And so the types of behavior that is typically subject to patterns are our thoughts. The first thing, this is the root of everything. What are you thinking? So thoughts, I believe, are lizard brain. I don't think that we can control our thoughts. They come unbidden. They may be for good or ill. You may see someone and immediately have a thought, some hateful thought. You didn't ask for that. It just came unbidden. And so, what happens next is what matters, right? So the patterns are what comes into your brain, these unbidden thoughts about someone else, unbidden thoughts about what's going on in the world. Yesterday, I had a big discussion with somebody on his perception of a word. And it was a very emotionally charged word for him because his thoughts were wrapped up in a certain way, right or wrong. So we have to recognize that our thoughts are not always within our control, but we have to think about what is our habit of either accepting that thought as real. Just because you think it doesn't mean it's real. Maybe you think, oh, well, she did that because she hates me. We accept thoughts as real, and sometimes those thoughts are not real. They're a script we've written based on our childhood or our beliefs, which is the next thing I want to talk about. And so we have to be aware. So the second bucket of behavior, the first one is our thoughts. And I'm going to talk about how we control each of these, but you can't even control or observe them if you don't know where they are. So the second one is your beliefs. Your beliefs are like a set of theories or rules that you create to make sense of the world around you. I believe, I don't, but I'm saying I believe everybody's basically just crap, or I believe that everybody's basically good, or I believe that everybody is black. Blah. I believe everybody's blah. You just fill in the blank with whatever you believe. And these are rules that we make. These are beliefs that we craft. Hang on. All right, gotta get down. These are beliefs that we craft based on how we want to make sense of the world. The next thing is our choices. These are choices that we consciously make. Choose to get up and go to the gym. Choose to talk yourself out of going to the gym. Choose to eat this or eat that, eat this way, eat that way. Your choice to whatever it is. These are choices that we consciously make, and they're subject to patterns. But the other one, again, that we aren't always aware of are these subconscious actions and choices that we make based on our unconscious or subconscious thoughts and beliefs. These are biases that we have, beliefs that we have, and these patterns drive us. When you see X type of person, you react without thinking. These are choices that you make without thinking about it. So when you become aware of where our behaviors come from, and then how they play out in patterns, then you can begin to start taking control of these things. But otherwise, you're really nothing more than an amoeba in a petri dish, thinking that you have a grip on things, but you're literally just responding to the stimuli around you, how you were shaped as a child for right or wrong, how you were raised. You're not really thinking for yourself. You're just responding to things. Now, let's be real. I need you to know this. Not all patterns are changeable, but your responses are. So let's go back to the innate ones that are hardwired into you. When you are hurt, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you're going to respond based on that lizard brain that I've talked about in another video about emotional intelligence. Your reaction, that innate reaction, as I said, some people, my husband, he gets mad. That's his reaction to either being physically hurt, emotionally hurt, whatever. He just gets angry. I tend to, over time, I've developed the habit of pausing. But used to, I would cry. That was just, you hurt me, and I'm just going to cry. But that was a secondary pattern. My initial pattern used to be anger, like fight or throw things or yell or beat you up with my words, right? And then I didn't want to be that person anymore. So the new pattern I developed was to cry, because it was frustrating that I didn't know what to do. And so the new pattern became crying. Well, now the newer pattern that I've built over time is pausing, reflecting, breathing. So I can't control how I feel. I still feel very angry, or I still feel hurt. And what I want you to think of is, you can't always control how you feel or those unconscious thoughts. You can only control how you respond to those things. And so just remember that not all of the patterns, the habits, the things that are in your life are changeable. You have to focus not on, I'm not going to tell you, you need to like that person. You need to not get angry. You need to not feel or think a certain way. What I'm going to tell you is, you can't control that. You have to focus on your response to that thing. So I want you to consider the power of habits in your life right now. I want you to think about, these are just 5 main areas that when I'm coaching and consulting people that I focus on. But these 5 areas are so under the control of your habits. And I want to spend a little time talking about each one of those. So the first one is habits and communication. There's a habit that women tend to get into, not so much men, but it's called submissive communication. And I'm actually going to pull out, let me see if I can get my hands on it. Okay. So years ago, I wrote a book called 20 Tips for Power Chicks. And in that book, there's a whole chapter on communication. And it talks about the different kinds of submissive communication that a lot of people use. So it's things like, well, you know, sorta. I sort of feel angry when you do that. I kind of feel upset. Maybe, and people are doing that because it's like a disclaimer, almost like, well, I'm not really sure what you're going to think about this. We're kind of buffering our message. And these are habits that weaken what it is we're trying to say, that cause our message really to be diminished. And we wonder why people dismiss our thoughts. And it's because we've given them permission to by how we presented them. Now, I will tell you, I use some of these techniques because I'm such a strong person. I will say things like, I'm open to being wrong, but here's what I think. I do that so that it doesn't come out bossy or pushy. I'm a bit of a bulldozer, and I know that. So I had to change to adopt some of these because I'm so strong, or I put out such a powerful aura, image, whatever. So we have to think about, sometimes though, when women in particular are engaging in submissive language, this is a habit that diminishes the message altogether. On the other side, interrupting is another habit that sends messages. And when we interrupt, and again, women tend to interrupt each other as a way of bonding when they're communicating, but men take turns. And so when men and women are talking, if a woman has this habit of interrupting and it works great with other women, she's not aware of or understands why the man she's talking to is losing his mind, frustrated with her, even if she's finishing his sentences with exactly what he was going to say. She's not engaging in a habit that is comfortable and familiar with the masculine style of communicating. I tend to be a masculine communicator. I don't like being interrupted. I want to finish my sentence. Let's all take turns. It's a habit, and it affects communication, and I can't control other people, so I have to control myself. Another one is when we're not listening. A habit that we all engage in is we listen to respond. We listen to tell our point of view. I'm listening to what you have to say. So I'm actually listening for you to stop talking, right? I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm waiting for you to stop talking. So and we use escalating words. These are words that actually aggravate a sensitive situation or make it worse versus de-escalating words. And so if you don't think habits matter, get on Facebook right now, get on social media right now, try and have a face-to-face difficult conversation with somebody. If you have bad habits in communicating, you're not even going to know why the conversation is going south. You're just going to say, well, they don't get it, they don't want to talk, blah blah blah. And in many cases, you can have so much more control over a conversation if you'll just change your habits. Hang on, let me see. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Oh, Donna says she's got this book sitting in her bookshelf. Thank you, Donna. So let's talk about how habits in relationships can really set you back. So the first one is boundaries. How good are you at setting boundaries? And you know, I'm talking about romantic relationships, but basically any relationship. And I want to tell you a funny story. People don't really understand or respect boundaries in many ways. You can tell someone, you know, this is my boundary, and you will be able to see how they can be, you know, what habits and patterns they have is how many times do they violate that boundary? How do they respect that boundary? I use social media as an example a lot because that's how we're all pretty much engaging in many ways. But when I set a boundary on Facebook, on a conversation, or in person on a conversation, we're not going to name call, we don't raise our voices, we don't use sarcasm, you know, blah, 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 blah. It's easy to see what kind of patterns and habits people are in when they engage in difficult conversations. That's how they handle that. So when you're in a relationship, what kind of boundaries do you have in terms of don't talk to me like that? You know, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I expect you're going to do. How do you articulate those things? What are your habits in that regard? What are your habits for trusting people? I learned over time that because of some difficult things in my childhood, trust was difficult for me. So before I worked on mastering myself, my trust was zero. I just didn't trust at all. It was difficult to love people. It was difficult to open up, difficult to be caring, because I just developed the habit of being closed off because it's so much safer. Well, over time, and as I've worked on myself, I've developed habits and patterns. I trust but verify, trust but verify. And then after establishing trust, I don't wait to find out that you've screwed up. I verify. If you say you're going to do something, I verify that you've done it. That builds trust for me. But these are habits that I have in personal and professional relationships. You know, somebody tells me something, I verify, is that true? Did they lie to me? Did they tell me the truth? Were they honest? You know, with love, you know, when we love people, you know, how is that love reciprocated? How is that love appreciated? Is there an expectation for that? Think about the habits that we have in regard to sex in intimate relationships, and expectations. We have so many, most people have such a bad habit of unspoken expectations. Well, if you loved me, you would just know that that's that thing you're supposed to do. You knew I was having a bad day, and so if you loved me, like life's a romance novel. I mean, that's just not how things work. But if we build up a habit of having these unspoken expectations and bad boundaries, and you know, trusting where trust is not deserved or earned. I mean, you know, we act surprised when things go south, but it's our habits and patterns of behavior that have brought us to this place. But we blame the other person for being an asshole, but they were an asshole when we met them. You know, our patterns are what let that into our life to hurt us. So I want you to begin to think about all the, you know, we talked about communication. We're not talking about relationships. I want to talk about finances. You know, how do you spend your money? What habits and patterns do you have? You get paid and you spend it all. You know, where do you spend it? How do you spend it? Are you spending it on crap, you know, that keeps up with the Joneses, or just junk you don't need, or stuff you think is going to make you happy? You know, how do you save? Where do you save your money? How do you pay your bills? Do you pay them on time? Do you wait till the last day? Do you spend your money on crap and then you call and make an arrangement to pay your bills? How much money do you make? What do you charge an hour? How much do you think you're worth? These are all habits and patterns that we've built up over time. Think back about, what are our innate beliefs and reactions? What were we taught by society? How are we coping? All of these things are habits and patterns. And think about all the control we give up. All the control we give up because these habits and patterns that we build over time. The next one is about success. How do you define success? What habit have you gotten into to think about what success really is? Is success for you this XYZ thing because over time you have built the habit of thinking that's success? Is it money? Is it fame? What is it? And how do you go after it? What kind of habits have you built to go after the success you desire? Well, nobody likes my book. Nobody likes my stuff. I know Tony's on here and she promotes her book all the time. She's not sitting back waiting for someone to like her book. When Donna published her book, who's also on here, when I published my book. I mean, how do you go after what it is you want? What habits have you built over time to push out the thing or to chase after the thing that you do or that you want? The other thing is what happens when you get there? What habit have you built that when you achieve what it is you're after, what do? You just quit? Do you set a new goal? Do you, what is it? And let's talk about habits and success. Failure is an integral part of success. So what happens when you fail? What habits of thought and behavior have you built into your brain about failure? What thoughts and habits about failure have you built into your brain about that? So again, look at all the control that you have, but look at all the control that you may have given up in each of these areas based on the habits and patterns that you've built and developed over time. And finally, habits and happiness. Again, I want to say, if you have a chemical issue, a clinical depression, I'm not talking, this is not for you. That is something out of your control. And you need, medical professional help for that. There is no shame in mental illness and needing mental help. I am talking about the people who are on this side of the line, okay? But how do you define happiness? It's funny. I have a friend, and for her, happiness is not stability. Happiness is crisis. She thrives on crisis. She doesn't realize it. She comes to me for advice all the time, but she thrives on crisis. She thrives on, I hate to say drama, because I don't really think that's what she's after. But I don't even think she's really thought about that component of it. Do you have a habit of thinking you don't even deserve happiness? How do you respond when things are good? Are you waiting for the other shoe to fall? Are you shooting out all this energy into the universe that you're not worthy, or that, oh, well, this won't last? I mean, think about your habits as it relates to happiness. What do you do to actively maintain and sustain happiness? It took me years to realize how much control I had over my own mental happiness, that whatever, I'm not going to tell you I'm happy 100% of the time, but I am going to tell you that I work to be content and grateful. I work to feel joyful. I work to find things that bring me joy. It's a difficult world right now. This is September of 2020, and things are batshit crazy. And there are days, and I'm going to tell you right now, I had a week where it was really rough. I did not feel happy. Nothing made me feel happy. I couldn't find it. And I realized that it was a phase, it was a season. And I kept going with my habits of happiness, looking for things that made me joyful, being grateful. And that season passed. And I looked to that time where that season would pass. But what are your habits when you feel depressed? Oh, it's the end of the world. It's always going to be like this. I'm never going to be happy again. Life just sucks. And so, and how long do you wallow? These are all habits that I want you to be thinking about. So all of this talk on habits, I want to give you some concrete action. Now, I say this is the simple 4-step solution for changing your habits, but you and I both know, I always coach my clients with a funny little thing that says, all you have to do is change your mind. Yeah, well, it's not always that easy, and I know that. So the reason I needed you to understand about thoughts and patterns and habits is the first step to changing them is you have to observe your thoughts. So let's just use for an example that you don't like how you respond to XYZ situation. So the next time it happens, you have to be mindful. What are you thinking? Okay, you have to just look for that situation to happen and look at your thoughts. Are you thinking about when that happened to you as a child and that's how you felt? So let me use an example. I used to be so incredibly defensive when I was criticized. Like, you could criticize me on something simple and I was just defensive. Even if I knew I was wrong, I would defend it. And as part of my personal growth, I finally addressed that one defensiveness. And I realized, okay, I felt defensive. I can't control that. Why do I feel defensive? I was observing my thoughts. I was thinking back to when I was younger. I was a child, and either my parents were extremely disciplinarian or I was made fun of at school. Sorry, my husband's playing a game, and I guess he hit a good spot in the game. So thinking about what are my thoughts when this thing comes up that I want to change? And then I had to observe my repetitive actions. So when somebody was, when I was being criticized or my work was being criticized, what were my repetitive actions? Okay, so the repetitive action in my case was justifying bad behavior or justifying without listening to their reasoning and seeing, well, is there anything that could be correct about what they're saying? And so I had to look at what were the repetitive actions. And then I had to identify, what are my limiting beliefs? Well, my limiting belief was that if they were criticizing, I was a piece of crap. My work was crap. They didn't like me. I'm going to lose my job, blah, blah, blah. So substituting new patterns for old ones here's how I handled the criticism. I began to realize that, first of all, we all need someone to help us do better. And just because someone has a criticism of my work, A, does not mean they're right. B, does not mean that if I'm wrong, that I'm stupid, dumb, or careless. And then I had to think about, I can't change how I feel, but I can change how I respond. And so when someone would say to me, well, don't be defensive, I had to learn, what's the response to that, right? Don't be defensive? Well, I'm not defensive, right? So I had to find a better response. So my new response became, I'm not feeling defensive. I have concerns about whether or not I understand your correction. How did we get here? Is this the right way? I have concerns about it, but I don't feel defensive. I just have concerns. So, let's not confuse the two. The point of it is, I had to start with observing my thoughts and my repetitive actions and identifying my limiting beliefs. So I want you to now engage in some homework. I want you to think about one thing. Just pick anything, preferably something small so that you can perfect the technique. But I want you to focus on changing one pattern. Now, I'm going to tell you how I changed. I've worked on changing my life since 1998. So we're talking about 22 years right now. And, I was a hot mess, and that's a whole nother story. But I will tell you that there came a time when I would pick a behavior that I wanted to change, and I would make it a theme for 6 months. So I had to change my communication patterns. And so for 6 months, that's all I really thought about. I have a whole lot of stuff I have to change in my life. I'm still working on me. I will always work on me. I will always have something that I need to improve. but I would pick something and I would say, okay, this is a thing I need to change. And so I would spend time, and it isn't about beating yourself up because that's not productive. It's about spending time observing without judgment your patterns and habits of thought and the repetitive behaviors you get into and the beliefs that you have that limit you. And so I would encourage you to just pick something. I don't care what it is. I drink too much Coke, right? So let's say you want to quit drinking so much Coke. Well, so first of all, you have to observe, what are you thinking when you grab one? You say you're not thinking, but are you, you're tired, you're hungry, you don't want to eat, so you grab a Coke because that'll fill you up. You makes you feel good because of the caffeine. I mean, why is it? What is it you're thinking when you do that? And then you have to go through the process of, how often are you drinking these Cokes? What time of day are you drinking these Cokes? Look for the patterns, right? And then what are the limiting beliefs? Well, if I don't drink a Coke, I'm going to get hungry. If I don't drink a Coke, I'm going to have withdrawal. If I, what are the beliefs that keep you from doing it? And then you substitute a good thing. Every time you want a Coke, you substitute water or juice or whatever. So I want you to take what you heard here today, and I want you to apply it to just one thing. You overachievers are going to, try and correct 2 or 3 things at one time, and then it's like going to the gym and working out too hard. Then you can be too sore, too tired, and you have a negative experience and don't want to go back. The whole thing about personal growth is it's painful enough when you're picking one little thing at a time. So don't make it to where it's so much that you don't do it. So here in about a minute, I'm going to give y'all, if anybody has any questions or problem solving that you want to engage in, there's about a 2-minute delay between what I say and what you hear and, when you type a response. So I appreciate everybody being here today. Please share these videos. I'm only going to do one more after this. And this is a 12-part series. I think it has some really good, valuable information. I think it can be helpful. And so again, just really appreciate everyone being here today. I don't see any questions. Again, I want to say hello and thanks to Tony and Donna who were keeping me company here today. And for those of you who watch it afterwards, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them. And until we get together again, my friends, you have been zinced.